Hello and welcome to Eye on China. I'm Liam O'Neill. Thanks for joining us. American interest in the island of Taiwan hit an all-time high recently with Nancy Pelosi's visit and headlines about a Chinese Communist Party takeover. According to Google Trends, the state with the most queries about Taiwan was its nearest neighbor, Hawaii, followed closely by California, then Washington State, then Alaska. Why all these West Coast states? It's been said that if Taiwan falls, the rest of the Pacific is at risk. So we better start seriously asking ourselves, how real is a takeover of Taiwan, and what would it look like? One of our favorite ways to answer such questions, we'll take a look at speeches from Chinese officials themselves. But first, let's bring you up to speed. Since taking over China in 1949 and causing the then government of the Republic of China to flee for the Taiwan island, the CCP has always promised that it would liberate Taiwan and free it from democracy. That was for its domestic audience. Its rhetoric for the outside world was always much, much softer, rarely, if ever, mentioning military means. But this has changed since Nancy Pelosi's recent visit. As soon as Ms. Pelosi left Taiwan, they didn't want to risk confrontation while she was there. Beijing began pounding its chest. According to the Washington Post, over a 4-day period, China fired missiles around Taiwan and flew jets into the Taiwanese airspace. Another arrival of a U.S. congressional delegation on August 15th prompted more live fire drills surrounding Taiwan and a simulation of an economic blockade. Dozens of cargo ships had to shift their routes. The U.S. vows to continue sailing warships and flying jets through the Taiwan Strait despite Chinese military drills. It seems that a major crisis could be coming. Let's listen to recent remarks from the Chinese ambassador to Australia, Xiao Qian.
As for our approach to the question of the Taiwan, we are waiting for a peaceful unification. But we can never rule out our option to use other means. So when necessary, when compelled, we are ready to use all necessary means. As to what does it mean by all necessary means, you can use your imagination.
If China were to invade and win, we don't have to use our imagination to see what will happen in Taiwan. When recently challenged by a news reporter that the Taiwanese people desire freedom and democracy and not the communist government, Chinese ambassador to France, Liu Xiaoye, answered this way.
De la propagande du Parti démocratique progressiste qui est aujourd'hui au pouvoir. Ouais. Bon, on peut imaginer quand un jour la Chine a, comment dire, reprendre ou bien réunifier Taïwan à la patrie, avec l'éducation, la population de Taïwan redeviendra patriote, redeviendra pour la réunification.
Il est hors de question de faire une...
So with re-education, the people of Taiwan will become patriots again. Well, back in Australia, Mr. Xiao Qian also echoed the need for re-education, but he opted for the word process.
I would rather not use the word re-education. Once Taiwan is reunited, coming back to the motherland, there might be a process for the people in Taiwan to have a correct understanding of China.
What is re-education, or going through a process, for the CCP? And why are they planning it for Taiwan? Well, it's not just the CCP. Any Marxist regime, once in power, seeks to eradicate the pre-communism thought processes of the people. Usually this means attacking religion and traditional culture, because these aspects of a people are usually anathema to atheistic and materialistic doctrines. Actually, Karl Marx was not an atheist himself. He was a devout Christian in his young life and then scorned God and turned to Satanism later on. This is all suggested in his poetry. And this turn is instructive for why governments built on his theories always have sought destruction of the cultures in which they've taken hold. Over 7 decades, and building on experiences from the USSR as well, the CCP has a very well-developed system for re-education. Its latest poster child, Xinjiang, the Western Chinese province home to one of China's largest minorities, the 13 million Uyghur Muslims. The Uyghurs are a Turkish-speaking people with a history dating back 4,000 years. In recent years, they've primarily practiced Islam. Violent suppression of Uyghurs has been leaked several times to Western journalists starting in 2018. Construction of massive facilities, often labeled as re-education or vocational training centers, first grabbed attention as they could be seen from satellites. Up close, they look more like prisons with tall walls, watchtowers, iron bars, and wire netting all over windows and doors. There are surveillance cameras everywhere, even in restrooms. In these facilities, between 1 and 3 million Uyghur Muslims are estimated to be detained. Charges are mostly trivial or are simply made up. Having friends or families overseas, keeping a beard, wearing a scarf, or simply looking suspicious. These are all charges found on leaked documents. Footage from this BBC report is taken from an official visit allowed by the government, and even then it's a bit creepy, with adults learning to praise the CCP in Mandarin, forced group exercises and dancing, singing moralistic songs written by Xi Jinping himself. Leaked footage has shown a lot worse. Rooms filled with instruments of torture, and some actual torture scenes that we won't show in this video. Extreme violence against women has also been documented.
They were 3 men. Not 1, but 3. They did whatever evil their mind could think of, and they didn't spare any part of my body.
The recent takeover of Hong Kong is also instructive for this CCP concept of re-education.
香港的社会基础，咱们实事求是讲，是中国最坏的地方，比台湾都坏。
That clip was from Xu Yan, general for the People's Liberation Army. He's addressing a room of educators explaining that Hong Kong is a lot worse than Taiwan because they've been educated by British textbooks for generations. It's not just religion that needs eradication, but also dangerous notions of freedom, democracy, and justice.
说香港回归之后就一个大失误，现在也总结，一切都不变，你不去殖民化怎么行啊？你香港回归这20多年，教材还是用港英国殊途公民教材，而且原来想改教材，家长不让改，说学生坏，年轻人坏是家长坏。
A bright point for the general were the reforms that have recently been put in place in Hong Kong.
去年咱们新特首林郑月娥上来之后，就2件事干得好。第一件事，那占中闹事的判刑；第二个来讲，从今年开始教材的改，你得用中国公民的教材，你怎么能用英国殊途公民教材？
So the great re-education of Hong Kong has started as well. Protests seen just several years ago are virtually non-existent now, with crackdowns being quite fierce, even deadly in some cases. Perhaps more than any other reason is that with the governmental takeover, Hong Kongers have lost hope. Pro-democracy media have been shuttered, journalists arrested, textbooks have been changed, with children now receiving a patriotic education. Books about Martin Luther King Jr. or Nelson Mandela, these are no longer available in libraries. I've just given you 2 recent examples of CCP-styled re-education. There's quite a bit of difference between Xinjiang and Hong Kong, of course. Lucky for Hong Kongers, It is such a cosmopolitan city and one of the biggest business centers in the world. Xinjiang-style facilities holding tens of thousands of people wouldn't really fit in with that city's vibe. But Taiwan is a little bit in between. There are large, highly developed cities with plenty of international visitors and businesses, similar to Hong Kong. Nothing like that exists in Xinjiang. But there are vast areas of wilderness as well, much of it obscured by mountains. Re-education camps there could conceivably look similar to those in Xinjiang. The big question, is an invasion of Taiwan going to happen? Well, for what it's worth, the Pentagon's latest assessment says no, at least not for the time being. But China's unprecedented military exercises are keeping the world on its toes. Not only would a military takeover result in great loss of life, you can be sure it would also result in a very forceful and violent re-education for millions in Taiwan. And as I mentioned in the opening of the show, for residents in Hawaii and the western states of America, if that happens, suddenly China may not feel so far away. Thanks for watching and joining us once again. We'll see you next time with an eye on China.